Yo, 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 what's going on, everybody? My name is Jack Lang, and we're coming at you from Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. We're on the road, baby, far, far away from our home in Davidson. We're excited. Welcome to episode 2 of Snowball. Here at Snowball, we invite on guests to sit around a Snowball microphone and talk about an album of their choice. We also chat with our guests to learn about them and their takes on hot topics. Expect fun, games, laughter, and amateur musicianship. Boy, this is going to be fun. What is the day today? February 24th, 2019. The album is War by U2, and this is episode 2 of Snowball, Alastair Binks. Today around the Snowball, we have our guest, Alastair Binks, who happens to be my uncle. Say hi to the people, my dude.
Hi, people, my dude.
So we have Al here, and we're going to talk about War by U2 today, their third studio album. But before we talk about that, we got to learn a little bit about our guest here. What kind of music fan are we dealing with? So let's get into it. Al, I got to ask you, when did you first get into music?
So, kind of from my earliest memories, I always was drawn to music. I just, the sound of music, I was always captivated by it. As I grew up, I remember I had a teacher in Canada in 5th grade, and they did something unique, and they let us keep the same teacher from 5th and 6th grade, and he was really, really into music. He played guitar. He'd come in and play his guitar and sing songs for us, and so that really set us on a musical path. And I remember the first album that we ever really listened to was Queen Night at the Opera, and that and Hotel California were sort of very early experiences for me. So once that sort of started, I was kind of hooked.
So obviously Eagles, early influence. What other stuff did you gravitate towards as a kid? What other artists were you listening to?
I wasn't really particularly artist driven, although I ended up having a lot of favorites. I was generally drawn to a voice. So if it was a voice that resonated with me, I was all in. I always paid attention to lyrics, so lyrics kind of mattered to me. So those were really the two things that hooked me in. But I wasn't specifically drawn to any genre one way or the other. As long as it hit those criteria, I was generally listening.
So obviously you were an avid music listener, but we also know that you played music a lot. And as you grew a little bit older, you started to play in bands and write songs and stuff. You want to take us through the history of how all that started happening?
Yeah, it's true. So maybe a little less traditional, or maybe traditional back then. But when I grew up, there was no internet. There was no way to really learn songs. The only way, they used to have song books that were kind of written by people who didn't actually show you how to play the song. They sort of gave you written music in traditional form. So it wouldn't really teach you the nuances and the voicings of how people played the guitar or how the songs were really written. So you literally had to sit down with a cassette tape back then, because there was no digital music.
Yeah.
And hit stop, hit play, and if you wanted to listen to the riff of Sugar Mountain or Hey Hey My, you just played it over and over and over again until you figured it out, which used to drive my mom nuts, I think. But that's how you learned a song. And sooner or later, either that or through your friends who played music, you learned enough chords or you learned enough voicings and things that you were able to start piecing things together a little bit more quickly. But that's kind of how you used to do it. So that's how I started, and I really, all through high school, I always just played for myself. I'd been singing a lot from when I was a young age, and my mom was kind of an inspiration there. So she had a beautiful voice and still does, but she was always singing in choirs and won a contest when she was very into going to record a song as a singer. So I was lucky enough to get some of that. And so I really just used to play for myself and never really played for anyone else, occasionally around the house or something like that. But when I got to college, one of the guys on my floor heard me playing the guitar one day, and he said, "Hey, you play guitar, you sing, let's do something together." And so that was sort of the beginning. He was a guitar player, and he sang as well, but he was a really good guitar player. So he and I sat down and just started figuring songs out together. Next thing you know, freshman year, we had a band. I went to Colgate University. Back then, there were no bands on campus. We were the only band on campus, and we convinced the school to give us a room downstairs in the basement of some building, and we used to go in there and rehearse all the time, and slowly started playing. We played for our dorm. Then 4 years later, we were playing in front of 500, 1,000 people on spring party weekend, and I carried that into playing in New York City after I moved out of after I left college, and I had a band in New York City and played and recorded there, and recorded albums, and had songs that got published. And now I teach my kids, and they spend more time playing music than I do.
They might be better too. They're pretty incredible.
They're pretty good.
And just so you all know, Al has a song in a movie, or had a song in a movie. Kind of a big deal. What was the movie again?
Yeah, I ended up with a number of songs that ended up in TV shows or movies. The most notable movie was a movie called The Girl Next Door, which is a remake of a what was it, Tom Cruise movie? I can't remember what it was now.
Something.
Risky Business. It was a remake of Risky Business, and a friend of mine who's really into music, he kind of taken a liking to what I was doing, and so he played it for the director, and he was looking for one more song, and so that ended up in the movie, and it was a great soundtrack because it had The Who and David Gray and a lot of great bands, and so that song ended up in the movie.
This guy showed up in the same soundtrack as The Who, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You're a pretty big deal as the sort of guest that I have go. But we'll keep forging on. Getting into the end of this, what have you been listening to lately? What sort of stuff?
I went through this period where I feel like we've sort of done everything in Western music. We've only got so many notes in the scale, and there's an infinite number of kind of combinations, but I feel like the ones that we gravitate to, it's all starting to sound familiar. Occasionally you get a great voice, or you get a really a kind of great melody, but nothing sort of sounds really new to me. But if I am listening to things, I rediscover old music all the time. Things I've been listening to, Neil Young. I've been spending a lot of time listening to Neil Young. I am a huge Radiohead fan. It's my favorite band. I think it's kind of the most unique thing that's happened in pop rock music in a long time. I still listen to R.E.M. I still throw on Led Zeppelin. I played Pink Floyd Animals for my daughter in the car the other day, and her comment was, "Wow, this song is 14 minutes long." And I'm like, yeah, it's really good though.
Damn right, it's 14 minutes long.
It's a song called Dogs, if you've never listened to
and
Pink Floyd.
For you listeners out there, keep a watch on that Radiohead comment Al just made. We will be listening to them in a bit, in a couple episodes, so very exciting. But you brought that up.
But lately, I really, really like Eminem's new album. I think it's unbelievable. It's Kamikaze is pretty incredible, and I think Billie Eilish is super unique sounding. I mean, she's just got this unique thing about her, and I think the way they're producing her, it's sparse, but whatever vocal mic they're using with her and how they're treating that, I mean, you really she feels very present right in front of you, and I think what she's doing is awesome.
Yeah, I sort of feel that what you've been saying, like, sort of everything's been done before, but it seems like what hasn't been done before is that there are always going to be new vocalists coming out with a new sound and sort of a new take, and there's always going to be new timbres you can find, new sounds you could find in that spectrum. And it seems like, well, that's where EDM's been going, and that seems to be where the new forefront is. I've been trying to, and then, well, there's rap too.
Yeah, rap's
sort of new as well, and I think those are kind of the three things that have yet to be completed in the whole Western music thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bad rap out there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, most of it, in my opinion. I mean, I think the hardest thing to do is to write a really, really good melody, then to find a voice that can deliver that uniquely. And so much as rap is kind of monotone, 2, 3, 4 notes that you're bouncing around between it for most of it, it's really hard to write something really good. So unless you're just an incredibly unique rapper, I mean, but like you said, I've always been drawn to voices, and a new voice is always kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to keep forging on here. Al has picked out a great album for us today, as we mentioned. It is War by U2. So we'll give you a little bit of background on U2 and how they came to produce or release War, and then what their history is. So here we go. U2 is a rock band that consists of Paul Hewson, also known as Bono, on vocals, David Evans, also known as The Edge, on guitar, Adam Clayton on bass, and Larry Mullen Jr. on the drums. They emerged in the early 80s and became known for The Edge's distinctive guitar proficiency and Bono's signature expressive vocals and his amazing lyrics. The band formed in 1976 in high school in Dublin, Ireland. They are still together, by the way, so that's pretty incredible. They formed in 1976 at the age of 14, or around that age. And they were not really by any means proficient musicians. They were heavily influenced by the punk scene of their time, which did not emphasize this, but since they have become extremely proficient, we can all say. And so 3 years after their first band practice, U2 was signed to a record deal, and they recorded their first album titled Boy the following year in 1980. And Boy was a pretty solid debut for the young band. They toured it internationally. However, with limited time to prepare new material on tour, their second effort, October, was conceived of pretty quickly and didn't really see the progress that they hoped. They released October in 1981, and it failed to chart well. So it was a relative disappointment for them, and they sought to take the next step forward after October and into War, which was their third studio album, which they released in February 1983 with singles Sunday Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day. The album achieved the success that they wanted and went number one in the UK, actually knocking off Michael Jackson's Thriller. Pretty incredible. It was meant to be a departure from their earlier work, and it addressed themes of social conflict, and particularly the consequences of war, as the name would suggest. The message of the record is one of surrender, and to emphasize this point, the backdrop of their sets on their international tour of the album was always 3 white flags. And rather famously, while touring War, concertgoers would often throw Irish flags onto the stage, and Bono would often tear off the green and orange in the flags, leaving only the white, which he would then decorate the stage set with. And this further emphasized that theme of surrender and unity. So along with these changes in lyrical themes, U2 also changed their musical approach as well. They came to the studio a lot more prepared than in the past and equipped with a new musical direction and a lot of preconceived lyrics. The writing of the songs was more collaborative as well, with The Edge writing multiple verses on multiple songs and members occasionally switching instruments, as we'll talk about later. The band also employed a different, more diverse sound, with Edge emphasizing some harsher guitar tones over what had become to that point his signature echo, and his echo took a little bit of a backseat on this record. They also employed more diverse instrumentations than in the past, with violins and trumpet featured on some tracks, and the drums famously have this really harsh militaristic feel on the record, which was a little bit of a divergence from their previous work as well. So all of these changes produced a landmark U2 album that marked the full arrival of the Irish band and their entrance onto the political scene, which they hadn't been onto yet. With the emphasis on active pacifism and surrender, they became lightning rods in this political scene, and they were notably incredibly nervous to debut the song Sunday Bloody Sunday live before it was released due to its strong statements on the troubles in Northern Ireland and the historical day Bloody Sunday in particular. This event occurred in 1972 when British troops shot and killed numerous unarmed protesters as Northern Ireland sought to secede from England. And before playing the song for the first time, an incredibly nervous Bono famously stated to the crowd that if they didn't like it, they would never play the song again. And the atmosphere at that show turned out to be very electric, and the crowd very much liked it because it is an amazing song. So after War, U2 has released 11 more studio albums, the most recent being Songs of Experience in 2017. With well over 30 years between their first and most recent release, U2 is a band of extreme longevity, critical acclaim, commercial success, and popularity. And over the years, they have become known for their influence in political spheres and the regularity with which they change their sound. And both of these themes seem to have their origin in their third studio album, War, which seems to be a true landmark album for the band. So, having got the history down pat, after that long, long monologue, it is time to discuss it. Al, when you were first listening to this album way back when, what were your initial impressions of it?
Well, I remember, there's not many albums or artists you necessarily would, at my advanced age, you would say that you actually remember the first time listening to it. But somebody had given me a cassette because they knew we were into music, and they said, you should check this out. And I was in the library, and I think I had my Sony Walkman, which was the state-of-the-art cassette technology with headphones at the time, and I popped it in, and I put on this record, and I was just like, what the hell is this? It just didn't sound like anything else. The sounds that Edge was getting out of his guitar, and the vocal, again, being drawn to vocals, and certainly this was a very sort of lyrically focused albums in terms of the message. There was nothing else out there that I'd heard that sounded like this. It was kind of a time where it was definitely post-punk, and we're kind of getting into some of the pop synth stuff, and I wasn't really into that at all. That was all too kind of mushy for me. But this had an edge to it, not to use that word again, but it sort of had an urgency to it.
Absolutely.
And there was sort of this attack in it, and it was just captivating. But there were sounds in there that I just never really heard before, and it kind of all made sense to me. I'd always been drawn to kind of things with minor chords or minor tones in it, and Irish music in general has certainly folk music. Droning is a common part of that, and Edge had picked that up in terms of his style. So droning is where you're leaving open strings that pedal through different chord changes. So they sort of make pedaling is just stays constant through different chord changes, and he used that to great effect, even in his, you could call them solos. We can talk about that a little bit more, but that's one thing I liked, is they didn't really use traditional solos, but even in the way he was playing chords, it was just different than anything else. So I absolutely remember the first day I heard that record, and it was different than anything else.
Yeah, I think I hadn't listened to War in entirety. I mean, I've heard Sunday Bloody Sunday, obviously, New Year's Day, obviously, music that was sort of played in the household when I was a kid. So I'd heard those before, but I'd never listened to the album in entirety. I sort of got into U2 probably 3 or 4 years ago via Joshua Tree, and that's sort of where I stopped. Saw them live, recognized the hits, but I never listened to the rest of it. And I think, what struck me initially about U2, and what especially this album strikes me with, is there's 3-piece, and they fill out the sound so well, or it's really just the Edge fills out a song so incredibly well, with simple song structure and just incredible use of guitar effects and musical choices. It's just very striking to me. And then I think on this album in particular, Bono's voice is on display. He's still young at this point, and his voice is incredibly unique and incredibly strong, and I also think the lyrics on this are very, very striking as well. I'm talking about some heavy subject matter, which they hadn't really done up to this point. So very different from what they've been doing before, having sort of taken a peek at that, and then maybe even a little different from what they did afterwards. I forget what their next big hit was, but their peak seemed to be Joshua Tree in my mind, and that's just not really much of the same as War.
Yeah, so the next record after War was Unforgettable Fire, where they first collaborated with Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois, and that was, they were still very young, and that was a much more experimental album, because Eno and Lanois were definitely into sort of creating these landscapes and tapestries, so a lot of that record is experimental, and they got actually talked into putting some just vamp vocals on some of the tracks that made it onto the record, but the big Pride was the big hit that came out of that record, that they ironically didn't play at Live Aid, but were supposed to.
Yeah.
Bad is a song that the studio version not a lot of people heard, but it was a huge, the way they reinterpreted it live, it became a huge anthem for their live shows, and that's the big song they played at Live Aid, which went on for about 11 or 12 minutes, which wasn't supposed to, which is why they didn't play Pride. But that record was very different from War.
Yeah. So Al, are there any tracks in particular that you would say? I mean, obviously the singles are big on this record, but are there any other tracks that stick out to you? What I'm trying to do here is trying to get you to talk about 40.
Yeah,
the last track on the album.
Look, I mean, most people have heard Sunday Bloody Sunday, and I like that studio recording. Some songs, especially for bands that play well live, I mean, I liked Sunday Bloody Sunday, but it wasn't my favorite track. I thought New Year's Day, the studio track, was really incredible. But the songs I listened to a lot, were a song called Seconds, and that's, I think, the second track on the record, and Edge actually sings the first verse in that, and then Bono takes over. And the Drowning Man, I love that. That was another thing. I mean, the guitar riff that's in the beginning is really Edge playing harmonics. That's really what's going on on an acoustic guitar, and I don't think there is electric guitar in that track. Mm-hmm. And they are using this violin treatment that Steve Lillywhite, their producer, had brought into the studio to sort of round things out. But I thought that was a great track. Surrender, I think, is a great track at the end. I think Edge is playing like lap steel or pedal steel or something, and that's got a very different sound to it. I just always thought that had a great groove to it. But 40 is an interesting song if you talk about songwriting and how, I don't know if you want to talk about that later, but that was a great example of, songs come about in different ways as a songwriter. Some songs come very quickly. Some songs take forever. Some songs you have a very good lyric idea or a melody idea. So this one I always liked because it came out of kind of nowhere when they were out of time in the studio. They knew they needed one more good track for to get to think their 10th song.
Needed track 10.
Yeah, so but they were out of studio time. They still didn't have a lot of money back then, and they were at Windmill Lane Studios, which is now a very famous place. But at the time, bands were coming in and going out, and so Edge had come up with this riff on the bass. Generally he plays a lot of stuff, but he came up with this thing on the bass. They figured it was faster for him to play that. Adam Clayton picked up the guitar. He played some feedback and guitar riffs, and Bono just picked up the Bible and started singing from Psalm 40, and the lyrics are based on Psalm 40, and the name of the song is 40. And interestingly enough, that became the last song they would play live. And Edge and Larry would switch instruments for the last song. Edge and Adam Clayton would switch instruments for the last song, and the lyric going out is "How long to sing this song?" And slowly the band would walk off one by one until it was just Larry Mullen playing drums and the drum beat, and the whole crowd is singing "How long to sing this song?" And then finally Larry Mullen would walk off, and everybody would walk out of the stadium singing "How Long to Sing the Song." Would just carry on and on. I think that carried on for at least, it was their closing song on the tour for at least that tour, and Unforgettable Fire, and maybe a little bit beyond.
Definitely a signature of that tour. And a couple notes on that story is that the conception of the song 40, basically they showed up at, I think it was 6 a.m. Their studio time, the next band was coming in that next morning and was already setting up their gear and stuff. And so the next band starting at like 8 or 8:30 the next morning. So YouTube, but like Bono, all of them going at 6, like we got to get this track out. They bang it out in 40 minutes. And that's what you hear on the record, mixing and all. So I think that's pretty incredible. And the How Long to Sing This Song, I don't know if this was intentional or not. But if you go back to the lyrics on Sunday Bloody Sunday, you see it reiterated here, the first track of the album. How long must we sing this song? How long? If you go back and listen to the song, you don't want to hear me sing it, but it's there, I promise. And that's a pretty ingenious little echo from the beginning of the album all the way to the end, providing a little thematic closure. I thought that was really cool when I went back and looked at it. Anyway, now's the time of the show, I think, where we ought to start cracking down on what we think our favorites are. from this. Favorite tracks, we got 2 of them. I think I have to go nostalgia here because I grew up with New Year's Day and Sunday Bloody Sunday. They're always going to be my favorite tracks on this album. Not to say that the other ones didn't strike me, but there's a lot of nostalgia and memory with those 2 songs. So those are definitely my 2 favorites, and certainly they were really, really good hits. Which 2 would you pick as your favorites?
So I'm going to say, just from, thinking back to that time when I was first listening to it, 2 Hearts Beat as One, the energy in that song, and just the uniqueness of that guitar riff over a great bass riff. I'm going to say 2 Hearts Beat as One, another great lyric, and I think I'm going to say Drowning Man. I just thought there's something wistful and kind of a little bit eternal about that track, and it just didn't really sound like anything else that I'd heard at the time, using the harmonics and everything. So I'm going to say those 2 tracks.
Great. So for all you hit lovers out there, followed my advice, listen to Sunday Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day. All you deep track lovers out there, we've got a couple recommendations for you right here. Rating out of 10, I got to give this one. I gave Sun City by Khalid an 8 in the first episode, and I have to say this is YouTube. This is real stuff. I give it probably like an 8.5. We're very, very good, complete, thorough album. I think 8.5 is my rating. What would you give it?
I'd give it a 9, just because there are parts of it that are, there's still some songs you can tell they're still learning and they're still experimenting, and some of the tracks are not quite all the way thought out and complete as ideas, but it was so, I think, defining about where certainly the guitar was going
and where they were going
and where they were going as a band, because you really heard the anthemic themes and the power of Bono's voice to be an anthemic singer, and just Edge was just using guitar forms and picking out of those and still using, delays and sounds that nobody else was using before. He used thicker strings than everybody else because he never didn't really feel like he needed to bend a string. Everybody else would solo and bend strings all over the place. He had no interest because he was really playing melodies and sounds as solos mostly than he was really kind of soloing. And so, that with using his pick backwards so that he got the dimples on the pick where your thumb would usually be holding, that is what he used. Just created these just unique things. And I think that became something that everybody picked up on. So, because I think it started to change the way people were hearing about how to interpret the guitar, and just some great songs as well. Just some classic hits. I'm gonna give it a 9.
Yeah, I mean that's why he's the Edge. He is one of those landmark guitarists who sort of changes the way people think about it, and that's why they don't call him by his real name anymore. That's why Bono's Bono. No one knows his real name.
I don't think many people call him Paul and Dave anymore.
Absolutely not. All right, so those were our top 2 each and our top 10 each. This was a great album, War by YouTube. Please go back and listen. Listen for some of the stuff we talked about. There's a lot of really interesting things going on and going into this album. A lot of history, a lot of musical expertise that's worth listening to. So please go back and listen on your own time. But we're going to break here in the middle with a little music. Obviously, we would play one of the actual tracks from the album if we could, but sadly we can't. So I've gone ahead and done the best thing with a little bit of a cover. Please enjoy that. Thank you.
I can't believe the news today. Oh, I can't close my eyes and make it go away. How long must we sing this song? How long? 'Cause tonight we must be as one. Tonight broken bottle across the dead-end street, but I won't heed the battle call. It puts my back up against the wall. Sunday, bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. And the battle's just begun. There's many lost, but tell me who has won? The trench is dug within our hearts, and mothers, children, brothers, sisters torn apart. Sunday, bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. How long must we sing this song? How long, how long? 'Cause tonight we must be as one. Tonight.
And we're back. I hope you all enjoyed that. I think I did. I'm not sure, but I hope you did. Really, I'm very insecure about my musical proficiency, so please let me know if you think you enjoyed it, because I would very much appreciate it. But now, I still have Al here with me, the music expert, the music prophet. So I think we ought to properly meet him, though. We haven't really met him. We know what music he likes. We know he really likes you, too, but we don't really know any more than that. So, Al, what do you do now? You're not a rock star anymore like you used to be.
I'm not. So I was always, of course, into media and entertainment. So I now work with companies that are in the media and entertainment space, and I'm kind of their operating partner or board member that doesn't go away. So if we have a meeting and we all decide it's a good thing for the company to be doing, I come back the next day and work with the management teams and make sure that we still think it's a good idea and we're actually going to go do it. So that involves content, some music, but it's mostly content businesses now, given where the world has gone.
Cool. And you have two children as well.
I do.
They are very near and dear to my heart.
Thank goodness.
Beautiful musicians, and I will say they're on their way to being even better than Alastair Binks himself. Those are Emma Binks and Katrina Binks. Katrina, who's famously now an amazing dancer.
It's true.
What do you think? Dancer music, which one do you like her to do more?
I think it's interesting. I always wanted them to have music in their lives if they were interested in it, but they always took to music from a very early age. They used to sing together. They were always listening to music. They both pick up instruments extremely quickly. I mean, I showed Emma a few guitar chords, and next thing you know, she's playing Karma Police by Radiohead, and she's doing it all by herself. But they both have beautiful voices. I'm very proud of
amazing
how well they sing. When they sing together, it's really beautiful. So now I can get their attention for long enough, we sit down and we try to do 2 and 3 part harmony, and if we can get your host to play the piano, because he's an amazing piano player, and join us, it's a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and word on the street out there is that Emma's been writing some snippets of songs. Emma, if you're listening, please send me more songs. I need them so badly. They're amazing. But yeah, when we all get together, the 4 of us, Emma, Katrina, Al, and me, sometimes we call ourselves Tanqueray 10 and play a few songs. So we have a lot of fun. So as we have been talking about music a bad amount tonight, it's fitting that we have a great hot topic related to that. This is the part of the show where we talk about a hot topic with our guests so we can hear their flaming hot takes. Today's topic is songwriting. Everything to do with it. How do you get a song? Where does a song come from? What is the best way to get a song? And we have a polished and professional songwriter here in Al. And I also dabble a little bit, so I've got some takes as well. There's a lot to talk about. So, Al, why don't we start with first, what would you say, how would you characterize your songwriting process? Everyone has a different one, it seems like. Some people don't even have one, but most people do.
I mean, generally when I'm writing a song or starting to conceptualize a song, I usually have a guitar in my hand. And sometimes there's a melody in my head. Most of the time not. I'm usually sort of like finding a chord or hearing something or a progression, and I'll start to form a melody over that, or I've got a lyric in mind. And so generally I'd say I have a guitar in my hand. That's not true for everybody in terms of having an instrument, but that or a lyric, that's sort of, or I hear a melody in my head. It's usually those things that starts it.
Where do you think, so some people talk about where songs come from. One thing that always has stuck with me is Chris Martin of Coldplay, who we both like very much, and has now become very influential and one of the premier songwriters of sort of this new generation. He always talks about how songs come to him from the universe, and he doesn't know how it happens. And
he's 100% right.
That sort of strikes me as, I mean, I'll just be, when a song, well, I don't know. I wouldn't say songs come to me, but if I'm lying in bed and then all of a sudden you sort of feel something, feel some sort of twinge, and you're like, oh man, I gotta write a song. And then and when you feel that and you go to write a song, it'll always come out very quickly. So there's something to be with that songwriting coming from the universe. I never find that if I really want to write a song, but I don't feel that twinge, it works out very well.
I 100% agree with that. There's no magic to how you do it. It can come from anywhere. It can come at any time. I think I'll give you two examples of famous people who've talked about this. And so Sting has written a lot of really, really popular songs in his time. Some unbelievable melodies and lyrics. And I think he had a famous comment once. Someone was asking him sort of a similar question. He said, well, if I could sit down and write a hit, I'd do it every day.
Absolutely. And there's no formula to it.
There's no real formula to it. It's sort of important to just be embracing everything around you and noticing everything and, emoting with as much as you can, because that's going to be the thing that sort of stimulates something out of somewhere, or you'll hear a certain chord progression or a melody will pop in your head. And but that said, there is a discipline to writing songs. If you don't try, nothing happens. And sometimes you have to try, and sometimes you end up trying a lot. And you might be working on a song that you just never finish, and you might think it's good, but it's not that great, and you just never quite finish it. But it does take persistence and practice and crafting to try it out. The other story I'll tell you is the Eagles were, session guys for Linda Ronstadt.
Mm-hmm.
Don Henley and Glenn Frey, they were drummers and guitar players and piano players for Linda Ronstadt, and they finally decided they wanted to learn how to write their own stuff, but they had no idea how to do it. So they learned by living downstairs from Jackson Browne in California and Los Angeles. And I can't remember which song it is now, but they said for 2 weeks this guy was driving us nuts, because every single night he'd come home and he was working on this chorus of this song, and he played it over and over and over again and kept tweaking it and changing this and changing that. And finally, 2 weeks later, that was the chorus that became famous, because he just finally cranked it out and figured out what it was that worked, and it sort of made it all work together. Yeah. So there's a combination of just pure instinct and sort of following your gut and your heart, and there's just sort of sitting down and sort of cranking through, and you never quite know. Some come quickly, some come slowly, and some never happen.
You hear songs or you hear stories about these huge hit songs that they're like, oh yeah, we wrote that in 15 minutes, 5 minutes or whatever. And it's like, this is one of the greatest songs ever to come out.
Truly, you know, sort of the most iconic names that that we've ever heard of. You know, I think they really just do have a natural gift for sort of finding and crafting that thing. You know, back to what we were talking about with War, like the Edge, he's really writing melody on the guitar that's a counterpoint to Bono's vocal. And that's what's so unique about his style, is he doesn't just sort of play chords per se. He's playing melodies, and he hears those melodies, and he knows, he has a good ear for what's a good melody.
Yeah.
And it's hard to teach that. You just have that or you don't. You know, like Steven Tyler sitting down, he was playing when they were all living in this house and they were just starting out. He was playing this weird thing in A minor, I think it was A minor, just a minor key, and the band kept coming and saying, "What is that?" He's like, "This is going to be the best song was ever written." And that was Dream On. He just knew. Like he said, there's something in here. So I think there are truly unique talents. They just hear melody better than everybody else.
And so in this, I mean, Bono and the Edge obviously had this amazing chemistry. Their melodies just somehow intuitively work together, and they play off of each other so well. And now we're in this age of everyone's doing a collaboration. People take time off between records to just go and collaborate with as many people as they can, and obviously it's a huge money-making boon to go ahead and do that, pulling your fan bases together. But also it has something to say with this sort of songwriting process. When you bring two different people together, something a little different comes out. Do you think that it's important when you're working with someone else to have sort of a previous chemistry, or are most of these collaborations that come out with people who just come in one day session, work together, put something out? Do you think they're mostly just very successful because it appeals to two fan bases in one and just has a lot of commercial success?
Well, I mean, most of the big collaborations you hear are already successful artists, so you're not hearing about, you know, the guys down the street are doing it, and so you're starting with a pretty, you know, well-defined talent base out of the gate. But I don't know that it just works all the time. I think you definitely have to have an affinity for it, and look, there's a lot of people who have writers working with them, you know, in this day and age. There's plenty of cases for even, you know, the most popular artists where there are writers back there writing chords, writing lyrics, helping in the collaborative process. I mean, when you see the songwriting credits of some of these songs, there's a lot of people involved, but you know, but it does take a bit of a vision for it too. Like I really like this track. I had never really listened to Justin Bieber at all, just not my thing at all. And I heard this track that one of my daughters played me, and it was by this guy called Pooh Bear, and I'm like, who's Pooh Bear? You know, like that.
His name's Pooh Bear.
It can't be right. So I heard this track, and it's this collaboration with Justin Bieber and Jay Electronica, and it's just a killer track. It's an unbelievable melody. The production's amazing. There's a rap in the middle with Jay Electronica. The whole thing just works. And Justin Bieber's vocal and his delivery is amazing. And the track is, you'll tell me because I can't remember.
I mean, I can't remember the name of it either.
If I stop talking, I'll remember. But
Pooh Bear and Justin Bieber. Come on, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
There are only so many Pooh Bear and Justin Bieber songs out there.
Hard to Face Reality?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Pooh Bear was in a studio, and I think Justin Bieber was recording in there, and he went in afterwards and was trying to talk to Justin Bieber, but there was a guitar track in there, and he went in because he was in the studio next, and he said, "Play me that guitar riff backwards." So he listened to that backwards, and that became the guitar riff for the song, basically the chord sequence. And then he went to Justin Bieber, and so he loved that and started working with it. Went back to Justin Bieber to see if he would be on it. He said yes. And then they were chasing Jay Electronica. He just said, you know who would be perfect for this? He had this thing in his head, and Jay Electronica was the guy. Like, I got to get him on it. So he worked with it. Finally got through to him and got him on it, and that's how that worked, you know. But he had to have the vision to sort of see that and see how that was going to work. And so that's him really as a producer, you know, sort of seeing all the pieces to go together. And sometimes the producers get overlooked in the songwriting process because they can be incredibly powerful.
Well,
and
it goes hand in
influential.
hand. Both of them are involved, and you see that a lot in these heavily produced songs nowadays. This is a very, like, these song structures are incredibly simple. Like, I mean, you mentioned Billie Eilish earlier. We were talking about this yesterday. You got these artists like Billie Eilish and Klee, these up and coming, like, teen, like 20-year-old artists. Both incredible melody writers, but if you look at their songs, it's just like 3-4 chords, like not a whole lot going on, but there's a lot of, like, pretty ingenious and, like, heavy production going on there, and then it just, like, supports these really interesting melodies that are different.
Yeah.
That sort of ties into something that I kind of want to ask you about is, and we mentioned a little bit earlier, is that it's starting to seem like everything's been done in Western music. Like, all the songs from the universe, it's like they're starting to get real similar to ones that have happened before. If you're gonna go out and write a song nowadays, well, obviously it has to be different to be anything at all. How would you go about making it different?
I don't think you can make it different on purpose. You know what I mean? I think it just has to come out of you, because the moment it's not authentic and you're not doing something that's really who you are, everyone's gonna know, and you're gonna tell. Or you're just gonna write something that sounds like something else. You know what I mean? And look, everybody has influences as musicians, and that's part of how we learn music and learn about music. But
and another question too is, like, what are the characteristics that make something enough different that, I mean, it really catches your ear from something that's happened before?
I mean, production is more and more a big thing, in terms of how to do that, but a lot of that's been done. We use a lot of the same instruments, and we've used a lot of them. We've used a lot of samples, and we've messed around with drums and sounds and miking, and I think that's increasingly hard, unless it's just so unique in terms of what you're playing that it just doesn't feel like anything else. So, the genres are sort of defined. Like, I'm trying to imagine a whole nother genre, and is it like,
it's hard to.
Is it opera based? Is it orchestra based? Hard to imagine that would work and sort of become popular in the mainstream. So I think being unique as an artist, you just have to be who you are. You
just have to be unique. You can't really make it happen.
There's a band I'm not thinking of right now that's another favorite of my daughters, that they really are a blend of everything.
I mean, you're seeing that now occasionally is, I mean, especially with Spotify and all these different streaming services that they have now, everyone's listening to everything, and so they go out, they start making music, and they're a blend of all these different genres, because you sort of put out music that you listen to, and if you listen to everything, it's going to come out that way, and it comes out pretty incredible. I think one thing that we haven't talked about, that's maybe we'll just put it on the table and leave it there, is sort of sampling is a direction that's been delved into a little bit, but it's sampling, and then really you see a lot of these mashup songs, and I think mashup songs, a lot more than really any other kind of song, I've seen really get people excited about. I mean, it really catches people's eyes when you hear a really good mashup that superimposes two things that you would never really expect to go together. People get really, really excited about that, and I think in terms of what's new in songwriting, I mean, we talked about new timbres, new production, just being unique, but I think also these realms of sampling and putting things on top of each other that you wouldn't really expect. Those are two avenues that are really could be a boon in the future. So I think that about wraps up our hot topic here, unless you've remembered anything that we have forgotten. Any song names or anything that we've forgotten previously?
No, although I would say about sampling, there's a tasteful sample, and I just had an argument about somebody this, and then there's sort of just kind of rip-off sampling. I think it's very controversial. Even if an artist says it's okay, I think it's cool to reinterpret things that are well known. But Moby. If you ever listen to Moby, listen to the album Play. It's incredible. and he was sampling a lot of old blues music and blues riffs and slide guitar, and he reinterpreted it in a way that was definitely unique sounding. It didn't sound like things you'd heard before, but it was also sort of, the controversial thing was he's ripping off blues music for the people who never actually made any money out of it. I just heard there's a song out now, you guys may know it, but it's Shape of My Heart, which is a Sting song, which is actually written by Dominic Miller and Sting. Great co-writing combination for that song. And it's an amazingly beautiful riff. It's actually very difficult to play. But somebody sampled it, and they're doing what I talked about before. There's a sort of monotone rap in the verse over top of it, and it's kind of like,
it's almost like they sampled it just because they couldn't do something.
It's like, couldn't you come up with something on your own that was that hooky? But apparently no.
Yeah.
So that's what gets you into the song. So I think you got to be careful about samples. It's really, it is creative, but it's sort of lazy. On some level, it's like, what if I started with something that's really, really popular, and then I did something over top of it?
I've already got the popularity part, and now I just need a little bit of genius, as opposed to coming up with the whole thing myself.
The band I was trying to think about before was 21 Pilots.
There you go.
Those guys are interesting because they're treading on ground that's already been trodden on, but they're blending all those styles in one song, and they don't care.
And they've almost defined a new genre themselves.
Sort of, because they've got the sort of 80s. There's an 80s vibe to what they're doing. They're using some of those sounds. There's rap. There's sort of basic rock.
There's a pop vibe in there.
There's a pop
vibe.
vibe.
A pop vibe in there.
And they're not afraid in the same song to literally go from one genre to the other and find an interesting way to transition. And it's two guys, which is pretty cool.
And they're an incredibly in-your-face band as well.
Great live band.
Yeah.
Great live band. So again, you've heard it all before, but they sort of reinterpret it in a way that makes it sound a little bit new. But again, that's just who they are.
Yeah.
And you got to be authentic. It's got to come out of you, or no one's ever going to believe it.
Keep coming back to this authenticity, uniqueness. And I think that's where we're going to leave this discussion on the hot topic of songwriting. What makes a song good? Where do you get a song? Does it come from the universe? I don't know. What makes it good? Maybe it's uniqueness. We think so. I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation from a professional, an expert, a prophet, Alastair Binks, my uncle, very proud. And that's going to conclude the show for us. This was episode 2, named after the man himself, Alastair Binks. And today we talked about U2's third studio album, War, which was a landmark piece for them. And you could even say it's a landmark piece in the history of music of that time as well. And again, we did talk about songwriting as our hot topic. Please tune in next time when we come back with our third episode. Yet to be decided who the guests are, but you can be assured it's going to be fun, it's going to be hot, it's going to be interesting, and we're going to be talking about some great music. So we will say sayonara to all of you, beloved listeners. This is me. This is Alastair Binks. Adios. At the wrong sense of what I want. I stumbled along, any credible thought was gone.
escape. She leans into me, and it is like a dream that I saw so many, many years ago. How have I been so dumb, so wrong? 'Cause she is like oxygen, and I've been out of breath. I was lost in my luck, on my luck, my love. I've been grasping across at the wrong sense of what I want. I stumbled along, any credible thought was gone. When the haze came over, I lost my composure. I'm sorry I waited so long to